We find ourselves in the middle of a financial scandal so vast it might just rival the infamous PPI mis-selling debacle. But of course, that hasn't really been fully explored, has it yet? At this time, the key players are car loan providers, and the Chancellor herself, Rachel Reeves, has been spectacularly snubbed by the Supreme Court in her bid to intervene. And the unfolding catastrophe for Santander, for Lloyds, and for a host of other financial institutions is not merely a tale of regulatory oversight, but an indictment of the continued efforts to obscure the truth, for corporate convenience. Now, why should we be surprised about that? That Rachel Reeves is involved in a scandal about trying to obscure the truth. Ha ha ha! The core issue at play is the secret commissions on car loans. Commissions that were not disclosed to consumers, that inflated the costs unnecessarily. And the Financial Conduct Authority, the FCA, flagged this malpractice back in 2020, banning commission structures where the dealer profited based on the interest rate charged to customers. Yet even this intervention, the matter of redress for past wrongs, has remained unresolved. The Court of Appeal last year ruled that lenders had an obligation to disclose these commissions to customers, and therefore potentially opening the floodgates for compensation claims to the tune of 30 billion or more. And this is a financial reckoning so vast, it makes the banking sector's lenders visibly nervous, and nervous they should be. Sensing this impending crisis for the banks, the Treasury made an unusual attempt to intervene in the upcoming Supreme Court case, claiming that the ruling in favour of consumers might restrict access to car loans and undermine the UK's financial stability that would ultimately benefit consumers. It's a convoluted argument. It was in essence a plea to protect the banks from their own stupidity, from their own misdeeds, from their own dark doings. And in a move that has stunned Westminster and the City alike, the Supreme Court has refused to hear it. This is where things get particularly interesting. Courts are generally reluctant to allow government intervention in cases where the state itself is not a party, and the rejection suggests that judges viewed this as an attempt by the Treasury to sway the legal process in favour of the financial sector, a move that, if allowed, would have set a dangerous precedent. Among the banks most exposed to this scandal is Santander, UK, which has already set aside a staggering €354 million in provisions, resulting in a dramatic 40% drop in profits for 2024. Lloyds, which owns Black Horse, the UK's largest car finance lender, has provisioned £450 million, while analysts predict the final compensation bill could reach a dizzying £44 billion, nearly as much as the PPI mis-selling scandal. It's no surprise, then, that the Treasury felt compelled to act on behalf of its banking allies. The fall in share prices of Lloyds, Close Brothers and Secure Trust Bank after the Supreme Court's rejection underscores the scale of the problem. It's not just a minor hiccup for a few lenders. It's a huge issue with the potential to reshape consumer finance in the UK. Now, let's turn to the Chancellor herself, to Rachel Reeves, whose involvement in this saga adds an exquisite layer of irony. Reeves herself, who's been embroiled in controversy over claims she exaggerated her academic credentials and told porkies on her CV, falsely listing herself as a contributor to the Journal of Political Economy, when in fact she'd only published in a much less prestigious European counterpart. This brings us to that broader point. How can we trust a Chancellor who seemingly struggles with factual accuracy when it comes to her own record? And now we see her department attempting to suppress the truth, attempting to suppress the fallout of financial wrongdoing on an industrial scale. The Supreme Court's rejection of her intervention is not merely a legal rebuff, it's an implicit statement that truth and transparency must prevail over the vested interests of banks and their government allies. Truth and transparency is more important than the whim of Rachel Reeves. The Supreme Court's upcoming decision in April could mark a watershed moment, therefore. If the ruling upholds the Court of Appeal's verdict, lenders will face a tide wave of compensation claims. And the government's hands-off approach, forced by the court's rejection, could ultimately strengthen regulatory oversight and embolden consumer protection efforts. Moreover, this case underscores a deeper malaise within the financial sector, a persistent tendency to operate in the dark, prioritising profits over fair dealing. And the Treasury's concern about the competitiveness of UK banks is nothing but a euphemism for shielding institutions from the consequences of their own unscrupulous practices. And the fact that Reeves, who has herself been accused of exaggeration and misleading statements, of lying, has tried to lend her weight to this effort only deepens the distrust in her economic stewardship. In other words, what are we saying? That Rachel Reeves isn't there for you or for me, for the people. Rachel Reeves is there for the corrupt banks and the corrupt organisations. Rachel Reeves represents the liars and the cheats who are taking advantage of you, of me. Rachel Reeves is part of that crooked landscape. Rachel Reeves is like the fencer who, takes a pat on the shoulder every time they purloin something and get a good price for it. Rachel Reeves is the public figure for deceit on a huge scale. What we are witnessing is not merely a legal or financial scandal, it is the credibility crisis at the heart of both banking and of the government. Santander and its peers may be the ones currently hemorrhaging money, may be the ones saying, well, we're going to leave the country. But Reeves and the Treasury are suffering something even worse, the erosion of trust, the loss of trust. Reeves and the Treasury are demonstrating why we should not take their word seriously. Reeves, particularly, why we should never have voted for this Labour government. You can't vote, you can't have a person in political power who is demonstrably a liar, if they were standing on the principle that they always spoke the truth, if they were standing on the principle that they were the honest Joe, because they're not. There's a big difference between Rachel Reeves and Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson was voted in, and everyone knew he was a liar. Rachel Reeves was voted in because she was apparently going to bring truth. And she's lied and lied and lied, it seems, on her CV. And now she's trying to support people who want to suppress the truth. How surprising is that? I don't normally do sarcasm. For consumers, the message is clear. The courts, not the government, will be the last line of defence against corporate exploitation, corporate deceit. For Reeves, the lesson is even more uncomfortable. If you build a career on stretching the truth, do not be surprised when no one believes you when it really matters. The banks and the Chancellor are learning this truth the hard way.